But not to worry. Next up, we have Claire Bennett, the CMO of IHG Hotels and Resorts, and she oversees 16 brands that span countries, demographics, and income values. Claire is responsible for all aspects of marketing execution and operations globally: food and beverage, guest experience, loyalty programs, sponsorships, and day-to-day revenue responsibility. Claire has worked across many industries and around the globe to 71 countries, in fact, but wow. We will let her tell you all about that. Welcome, Claire.
Thanks, Andrea. Hi.
Claire, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you had a wonderful beginning to the week. I would love to set the context for everybody, but not at your professional level. Let's take you all the way back.
Can I do one thing, Gary, though?
You can.
I want to say how I know Andrea, because it's kind of a cool story.
I'm so into it.
We are a bunch of, I met her through a group of women who decided a while ago that we wanted to put our money where our mouths were and invest in companies that were led by women CEOs. So that's how I know Andrea, is I met her with a group of people that probably has been together, I think 6 years, probably, Andrea, just investing in these businesses. We've done incredibly well, outpacing the S&P, except for this year. We found out not a lot of women run tech companies. So we need more women running tech companies. But anyway, just wanted to give a shout out to Andrea, and thank you for the opportunity for being here.
I love you for doing that. Thank you. It adds so much context and charm to the show. Claire, take me back to the beginning. Like, what kind of little girl were you? Were you a good student? Were you entrepreneurial? Were you a reader? Were you outgoing, introverted? Give us a little context, because I think, you know, there's so many people under the age of 21 that listen to this program. And I think when they see themselves in other people, it really helps. So, and because we're just getting to know each other, I'd love that context. I'm being a little selfish, if you really want to be honest.
No problem. Thanks for the opportunity. I came from a large family. I have 5 brothers and 1 sister. So I think that very much colored my background in terms of how I got to where I am today. One, I think when you come from a large family, and again, particularly with a lot of brothers, you learn to choose your battles and really fight for the things that matter, but sometimes knowing when to sort of lose the battle to win the war.
Where were you in the order of 7?
Almost last, until my surprise younger brother came along.
So you were 6.
Yeah.
And what's the age difference between you and your youngest brother?
8 years. And then
so you had this whole identity of being the baby.
And he ruined it for me.
And then on your 8th birthday, he completely ruined it.
He did. So anyway, lots to unpack there, Gary. We can
listen, trust me, my mind's like, oh, that's how, there it is.
No, I think it's really just, it takes a lot to phase somebody, I think, who comes from a large family, because you kind of learn to go with the flow, which is pretty appropriate for the world we're in right now. You sort of learn to adapt and respond. And as much as my brothers drove me nuts growing up, I love them dearly. And we're all, and my sister, we're all very close, and still get together once a year for a massive family reunion. And we kind of did a little half version of that this year. So
super nice.
Figured out how to make it happen.
And what about career? What was your first professional gig?
I was an accountant. So I started my career in finance.
Did you like math?
No.
Did you do it because you thought it was a safe, steady, like were you, you were told that was a smart place for you to consider, and you were like, why not?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I think it helps immensely, right? I mean, like, I think as marketers today, generally you're helping run the business. So having that context and that mindset is incredibly helpful in my day-to-day job. I mean, we really have a large job to do to drive the revenue and to make all the business trade-offs in terms of which new brands we launch, what we invest in. So it's been incredibly helpful. But I worked in a lot of industries too. I worked in consumer packaged goods. I worked for Dell in technology. I worked in I was on the board of Tumi, so I sort of got a little taste of the retail space. And then I worked for American Express in financial services, but they have a large travel business, and that's what started me on sort of the path to getting in the hospitality industry.
On the front, hearing those kind of amazing places, and obviously to get on boards and things of that nature, and to where you are now, it was a successful career journey. Another thing that, just listening to you, that I think could really help some people, talk to me about the best boss or mentor or rabbi or bodyguard, you know, when I say to you, who really stood out in these big companies? Because so many people are listening are early in big companies or actually don't want to be entrepreneurs, have deployed self-awareness and do want to work in big companies. I think this is an important story. Who was the great champion for you or two? Who stood out early and what did they say? What was their piece of advice or action that changed the trajectory of your career?
Well, I think it was someone who actually, I'll tie back to the Andrea piece of our discussion, because it's Mary Dillon, who is the CEO of Ulta Cosmetics. And when our investment business did really well, it's when Ulta Cosmetics did really well. So I have Mary to thank for a lot of different things, but I worked with her when I started my career in consumer packaged goods. She pulled me from a finance role into marketing.
She gave you the air cover to what people don't know. If you're listening right now, that's tough because people always want steady tracks. So this mentor saw something in you. She took a risk and moved you over because she saw something in you.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I actually asked her later, you know, why did you do that? And she used those exact words. She said, I saw something in you that I'm not even sure you saw in yourself.
Love it.
And I wanted to give you that opportunity. So I think that's incredibly important for all of us to think about. And it's great today's show is about entrepreneurs. I look at our business right now, we have 16 hotel brands, but kind of the three critical ones were all started by entrepreneurs. Holiday Inn was started by an entrepreneur who wanted to build interstate travel in the United States. Kimpton Hotels was the boutique business, and Bill Kimpton built that to grow that. And then our Intercontinental Brands was an entrepreneur, Juan Trippe, who started Pan Am Airlines and wanted to build intercontinental travel. So all these people, you look at like their path, how they started something small that became part of something really big. So for those entrepreneurs on the phone, that's kind of cool to think about how your path is just a beginning of what could be.
You know, it's funny living as an entrepreneur and being in corporate land and thinking about so many people in here. And, you know, for example, the gentleman that's following you, I mentioned him once, I'm mentioning him again because I look for Jeff Smiths. You know, Andrea talks about you to me, by the way, in a way, like I actually, you know, the way we have the structure today from entrepreneurs to change agents or vice versa, I've been surprised how my own opinion of entrepreneurial tendencies and I know I'm bouncing here because I'm excited. I love when I change my mind. I think there's a lot of people that lack one trait of enjoying risk versus being concerned about it. But they have every other tendency of an entrepreneur. And I now encourage them to feel very excited going into companies because their skill set has an incredible opportunity for flourishing in that environment.
Absolutely.
Because I think if they're thoughtful to not put themselves in a very risky spot politically, the person that understands not to take too much political risk, but enough risk to innovate and help bring value to the business has an unbelievable path within corporate environments. And so, you know, I think to your point, I think that the person that has that level of creativity, there's just a very clear path now for me for certain people that can win in an enormous way in corporate environments if they tap into both capabilities.
And I would say this crisis that we're in, all the behaviors that we're using in our big company are things that entrepreneurs just do innately. You know, we're doing stand-ups, we're having meetings, you know, on the spot. We're not using decks. We're making quick judgment calls based on the data we know. Not only the data we know, but also sometimes people say things in data that they're doing, and then there's sometimes people say what they're going to do, and then there's the data that actually says what they're doing. But being able to move and respond to that at the speed that entrepreneurs are used to, I think is very similar to if I look at all the behaviors our company implemented in this time period, it's all those things that you've talked about with your entrepreneurs. And being a stand-up comedian doesn't hurt. Like being funny in a corporation, especially when things are incredibly stressful, that's good. By the way, not always good to follow a stand-up comedian. That's not
fair enough. What are you seeing out there, Claire? Like what's an interesting insight from luxury to mainstream pivoting during this time?
Yeah.
Consumer driven data is probably a place you can talk to given your Amex and like I can see the connection points. when I throw those kind of three things at you, what would you like to touch on our time here?
Well, I think it's moving at a pace that we've never seen before, right? And so I think about our business, we're in 100 countries, and at any point in time, things were changing, especially early on, things were changing so fast. Remember when we thought masks were bad and then masks were good, and then, you know, how the virus
Or it's only going to be 2 weeks, and then you realize this might be 2 years.
So I think it's just, you know, the data is moving so fast that it requires us to be on top of it every week. So we're meeting every single week and watching what's happening. It does help to be a global company because you see consumers tend to behave similarly, right? As human beings, there's certain things that we behave similarly, and you can kind of see those countries that are ahead of other countries, how behavior starts to turn and what that might mean. And so we're able to kind of look at the whole industry and around the globe and see what's happening. I mean, in China, they are traveling again. I mean, our business there is almost back to what it was before, right? So
is that right?
Yeah,
we're there.
So even business travel is happening.
What about Europe?
Europe it depends, right? So what we're seeing is mainstream business travel, which is sort of drive to locations, has done pretty well in this environment. As we all know, we were trying to get away for the weekend, et cetera.
Yep.
And our number one objective is keep people safe. When we did that, travel was okay and people were out and about. Resorts have done really well. Those two sort of ends of the spectrum have done really well. It's the middle that I think will continue to, it's that business, you know, large
Right, because
business.
a lot of those hotels rely on the conferences that are happening. So that's getting affected.
Right. So we've had to think about, you know, we have to look 2 to 3 years out. If that's the environment we're in, how do we pivot with the business we have?
Let me
and
ask you
think
a
through
quick
that.
question. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to get this in before you leave. One thing that I've been thinking a lot about, and your energy just took me there. So I believe in a very consumer-centric communication strategy, right? The big companies that are on this are all, you know, for the most part, top down, right? Strategy from, you know, a strategist, a creative brief, a TVC, or a brand play, and then matching luggage in digital. I'm observing that people learning to be more entrepreneurial, fast, consumer-centric in their operations is starting to create the first meaningful debate. And I'm talking about people that I really know who've been adamantly against me. Like, you are wrong, Gary. You don't get it. You're wrong. Who have now started kind of like, even a couple off the record, like phone numbers and emails I didn't recognize because they don't even want to trace it, or like, hey, you might have been more right than I thought. We learned this about our ops. Is this how you see it in communication?
I mean, people creating their own, companies creating their own messaging.
No. Literally employees who just don't want to use their corporate email, admitting that their strategy for the communication isn't working, and like off the record having talks with me of like, hey, actually, how do we do digital right? We didn't realize that we could be faster. You might be right. Maybe we should put out 1,500 pieces of creative at lower cost instead of—
That's 100% the way that we've gone. I think that is going to be one of the biggest game changers for the creative industry ever. Like, we had to have people on property do this for us immediately with an iPhone. And that's how we trained thousands of employees around the world on safety and cleanliness. That's how we got in social media to say, hey, this is where it's safe to travel. We've done everything to keep you safe. This is how we got all of our messaging out. It's all social media right now, and it's all created quickly, because by the time you create something, you know, develop creative, you got to—
Speed matters.
Right? Like, at the time we were going to message something about UK travel, they closed their borders. So we had to throw all that out, start over. You've got to have people on the ground who can do that. And we found people who we didn't know had it in them, and they've done it. And that's been the cool part of this, right? Is like, new things get created. So,
Andrea, I need at least 2 more hours with this incredible woman. We have to follow the schedule because I'm getting texts like, don't be a jerk, Gary. By the way, Claire, my team has totally figured me out. They can see that I'm getting in the zone with you here, and they're like, uh-oh, we're going to lose him for 15 minutes. So kudos to the team to keep me on schedule. But Andrea, I expect some real time with Claire.
thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
You were right.